The COMET project. This has been quite a journey for us. This COMET standing for Conservation Monitoring Effectiveness Techniques. And this is a project, it's an initiative of the Conservation Measures Partnership, funded by Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation. So to give a quick overview, and I'm the Gautam Surya mentioned at the bottom of this slide here. I first want to just sort of introduce the general COMET ecosystem and kind of give credit to all of the different people who are involved, because without everyone's help, this would have never come together. And if I've left out your name here, my sincere apologies, and please reach out to me and I will add it. So the technical work for this, which was mostly the interviews and collecting of methods and drafting a lot of the text, was led by WCS, so myself, Rachel Newgarten, Vanessa Rathbone, and Samantha Strindberg. The traditional knowledge piece will be presented by Dr. Xiaoyue Li, who's at Southern Methodist University. Website and design, Adam Miller, who I think is on this call from SongSwift, Vanessa, and then Brian Knowles. Justin Grubb helped us a lot with communications. You might have seen some of the LinkedIn posts and things like that have come out. And then we had a steering committee consisting of a couple folk from CMP, Will and Kara, Varsha from FOS, and then David Wilkie as sort of an emeritus CMP WCS person. And then we had a larger advisory committee of monitoring experts around the world from different institutions with different backgrounds and expertise. So what were we doing with all of these people? Well, starting as always, as is tradition with CMP, with the conservation standards, we think about monitoring methods within the conservation standards cycle. And particularly, we often think about it here, right? So in your planning stage, developing a monitoring plan. But in truth, I think we understand that monitoring is embedded throughout the cycle, whether that's in the implementation stage, where you're actually implementing your monitoring plan and collecting information, when you're taking that information and using it for decision-making in the analyze and adapt stage, when you're sharing that learning out so that we can improve wider conservation practice, and then when we're using that information to reassess our context and situation, and that, of course, then would feed back into iterative planning and adaptive management. So monitoring is really fundamental to carrying out any conservation project, right? Without having that base of information that we can collect, we don't necessarily know what we're doing, what effect it's having, whether that effect is positive or neutral or negative, and how to change what we're doing if needed, or keep going, and how to make sure that other people have the information they need to also have success with their conservation projects. But despite that, a lot of the information about monitoring, and very specifically monitoring, is quite fragmentary. Because on the one hand, conservation projects tend to generate a lot of gray literature in the form of donor reports and other sort of white papers and things like that. But those things tend to be a little bit scattered. And so even if a particular monitoring method worked in a given context, in a given project, we don't necessarily have the ability to look across and see how well that method might work in other contexts, in other projects. And on the other hand, you have a wide body of academic literature, but again, a lot of those things tend to be kind of one-off studies. And also a lot of academic literature tends to focus on methods that may be very accurate at generating information, but that are not necessarily practical or cost-effective when deployed at scale in conservation projects. And so what we're trying to do is pull together a platform of industry-standard, field-proven, cost-effective methods for monitoring. And a really important component of this for us was that we wanted to include traditional knowledge and indigenous and local monitoring systems. And we understand that there's a growing body of work showing that engaging with these other knowledge systems leads to much better conservation outcomes, in addition to being sort of the ethical thing to do. But in the context of monitoring, there just isn't a lot of guidance on how to do that and what that would look like. And as I mentioned, Xiao will be presenting on that in a few moments. And so what we wanted to do was work with practitioners, and again, including Indigenous and local communities, to understand the challenges and successes of their monitoring efforts, take all of those lessons and bring them together in a way that practitioners could access and provide and obtain sort of A to Z guidance on how to monitor for particular things, right? From tools that would make it easier, protocol documents, softwares that make analysis of certain data easier, visualization, whatever that might be. And in particular, the methods we wanted to focus on, because ultimately what COMET is a collection of monitoring methods, is that we wanted them to be transferable, which is to say we want to make sure that these things have been used multiple times and in multiple places, because if that is true, it is more likely that a practitioner in a different place can pick something up and try to implement it in their area for their work. And there's a caveat here, which again, Xiao will get into more, which is that traditional knowledge often definitionally is very place-based. And so a lot of the traditional knowledge work would not be inherently transferable, but other types of methods like camera trapping and things like that with other epistemologies, those kinds of things we wanted to ensure the transferability of. We want things that are effective and efficient. So as I mentioned, you might find these super detailed academic methods that require a ton of input resources and that are just not practical for, a small NGO with a few people working on the ground. Can you get 90% of that information with 30% of the expenditure? That would be really important. And finally, practical. So practical not just in terms of things like cost, direct monetary costs, or materials or instruments, also just can you actually put this into practice in the field? Are these methods requiring like truly random sampling in hostile terrain, for example, which is just not going to be something that you can do. And in particular, we really wanted methods that people had put into practice on the ground and been able to do that and found success with those methods. And so our major approach was interviews, although we did supplement this with some literature searching. So we interviewed well over 50 people with semi-structured format. So we had kind of a general framework of the things we wanted to ask, but we then had the flexibility to allow those conversations to move in different directions depending on the expertise of the people involved. And this also includes traditional knowledge holders. In terms of the expertise, we had, whether it's species monitoring expert, habitat monitoring experts, wildlife and human health, human well-being, hunting, threats, acoustic monitoring, governance, so a lot of breadth of expertise here. And we were able to get people from over 20 institutions and or Indigenous communities. We got representation from all continents, I guess, except Antarctica, so sorry about that, but all the others. Most of our interviewees were actually women. And so we think between all of these things, we're actually able to get quite a lot of breadth across a spectrum of monitoring experience. And then, as I say, we would supplement some of these interviews. They would lead us to certain places, and then we could do some targeted literature searches to maybe flesh things out or find resources and things like that that would help implement some of these methods that we found. And so what we did is we basically went from there. We developed a typology of indicators, and there are existing typologies out there, but what we were looking for is something that was neither too specific. So for example, there are indicator typologies used by large NGOs, which have, leopard population and lion population and cheetah population as like different indicators. And we want something that was a bit more broad, that you could say a single method could be more easily applied to multiple indicators. So we have these broad categories of habitat, species, threats, human well-being, biocultural indicators, and governance indicators. And then within each, we would
Hola,
have
Ever, ¿cómo estás?
uh, within each we would have some subtypes. So, for example, within species monitoring, you might have things like abundance or presence or behavior. And then as we collected methods, what we would do is we would assign those methods to different indicators. So again, that's one of the reasons why we wanted the indicator categories to be a bit lumpy. We didn't want to have, lion camera trapping, leopard camera trapping, tiger camera trapping as different methods. We wanted to make things as broad as possible, but then also provide resources so that people could apply those methods in more specific circumstances. And one thing to note here is that you could have a single method that would give you data on multiple indicators. So for example, if you're doing quadrat sampling, you can get information on both vegetation type and vegetation health. And you could also have multiple different ways of measuring a single indicator. So you might have multiple methods, all of which are sort of equally reliable and practical to measure a given thing, like species abundance and population. As we know, there's a few different ways of getting at that, and all of them are quite good. So at this point, I'm going to hand over to Xiao to talk about the traditional knowledge component of this project.
Yeah, thank you, Gautam. If you don't mind, you just have the control over the slides. Thank you. Well, thank you everyone for being here. So I'm going to shift now to the piece of COMET on traditional knowledge. So I want to kind of walk you through why traditional knowledge matters for COMET and what we are building, and also at the end where it actually fits into the more broader conservation standards cycle. So first, I want to spend some time on definition. This is a fairly new development on the guidance document. I have not been able to make the revisions yet. It will be updated later of this guidance document, just to let you know. For the definition, I think I want to talk about this because how this field names and defines this knowledge is sort of itself a live and contested debate, right? So the definition on screen actually draws on two sources, and I think it's worth talking about because they're doing different jobs. So one source is from the CBD Article 8J, which is a legal obligation, which requires signatory states to respect, preserve, and maintain the knowledge, innovations, and practices of indigenous and local communities embodying traditional lifestyles, where that knowledge is relevant to conserving and sustainably using biodiversity. So that's a binding treaty commitment on governments, not a scientific definition. So the other source is from the IPIS 2019 Global Assessment report. So this part actually supplies the more descriptive half, which was building on a 2013 expert framing that describes this knowledge as accumulated across generations and guiding how communities interact with their surrounding environment. So our guidance actually synthesizes both the legal framing of what states are obligated to protect and the descriptive framing of what that knowledge actually is. So I mean, although I'm putting a definition here on the screen, I want to be a bit more clear about why it's kind of a slightly uncomfortable choice, because every author who works with this term makes the same sort of move. We adopt one working definition for shared reference, while explicitly flagging that no single definition can actually fully capture something this plural. So we are doing the same thing here. So for the same reason, while I think practitioners need one common reference point to work from, not because this fully captures what TK is. I also want to highlight two features of this definition. So first, this knowledge is not separable from the people who hold it or from the land it comes from. So the knowledge is relational. It's not a discrete fact that you can extract the way you would extract a data point. And second, it's plural. It's not singular. So there isn't one traditional knowledge. There are as many distinct traditional knowledges as there are peoples and places. So any questions or so I also want to highlight that this is like exactly why this we treat the definition on screen as a shared starting point for this guide. It's not a final or universal answer. And also on the terminology, you would see TEK or LK or LEK or LK all appear in the literature. But for the purpose of clarity, that COMET actually uses TK in the document and on the website. And one more distinction here I want to make is the indigenous peoples and the local communities. So we didn't use IPLCs. We used indigenous peoples and the local communities in the document because indigenous peoples hold additional protections under UNDRIP and the ILO 169 that don't automatically extend to local communities. So the guide actually keeps the two separate rather than collapsing them into one category. Gautam, can you move to next slide? Thank you. So why does COMET need to kind of build on the traditional knowledge part? I want to talk about three reasons. The first is the participation problem. So Thompson, Lance, and Ban actually conducted a systematic review of how Indigenous engagement actually shows up in the environmental monitoring literature. So their finding was that the literature most often characterizes Indigenous participation as data collection. That's it. So not governance, not design authority, there's no ownership. And in other words, Indigenous peoples and local communities are quite overwhelmingly cast as data collectors, not partners. So that's the pattern we're trying to interrupt. And second is the effectiveness case. So Downs and colleagues reviewed more than 100 published conservation governance cases back in 2021, where local communities actually held actual governance control. 55.9% of the cases actually produced positive combined social and ecological outcomes. Where control was externally imposed, that number dropped to 15.7%. So the governance type here, meaning who actually holds the decision-making power, was the strongest predictor of success in the entire dataset. And then third one is a policy imperative. So just at the COP 16 in Cali back in October in 2024, parties formally adopted traditional knowledge as a headline indicator under Global Biodiversity Framework Target 22. So governments are now formally accountable for how traditional knowledge is incorporated into biodiversity monitoring. So practitioners in the field need guidance that meets that bar. I think right now, most of them don't have it. And lastly, I want to mention that everything we've built rests on Indigenous research methodologies, community-based participatory research, and the CARE and OCAP principles for data governance. So these are pretty much the methodological backbone of the whole guide. Next slide. Okay, so more concretely, what are we building? We have two things out of the COMET TK part, and they're designed to work together. So the first is a practitioner's guide to working with Indigenous peoples and local communities in conservation monitoring. So at its core is a 6-phase ethical engagement framework, which I'll walk you through in a moment. So it's also grounded in the few things that I mentioned earlier, the Indigenous research methodologies, community-based participatory research, the CARE and OCAP principles, the FPIC, and the UN DRIP. So it covers everything from a practitioner's own preparation and self-reflection all the way through to knowledge mobilization at the end of a project. And it's actually mapped directly onto the CMP conservation standard project cycle, step 1 through 5. So it kind of slots into a workflow practitioners already know. It also includes a glossary, the IRB guidance, and also some of the available regional protocols. So the second deliverable is the Indigenous monitoring methods entries on the COMET platform itself. So these are field-proven methods that Indigenous peoples and local communities use to monitor their own environments, such as participatory mapping and ethnocartography or seasonal calendars or phenological trackings, etc., and etc. So I want to be a bit more precise about one distinction here because it comes up quite often. So the guide covers PK expert method, things like semi-structured interviews or focus groups, but those are researcher tools and they're not on the COMET platform. It's not on the website like entries that you can enter. So what is on the platform are the monitoring methods that communities themselves use. So the guide is a companion document that explains how to engage ethically, and the platform entries are the methods themselves. Next one, Gautam. So this 6-phase engagement framework, I think is, I would say it's the spine of the guide. So the framework covers 6 phases and they are mapped onto the conservation standards steps 1 through 5. So it asks pretty much practitioners to do the workflow that they already use, but a little bit differently. So phase 1 is institutional audit and positionality, which mapped onto the conservation standards step 1. So before a practitioner ever approaches a community, they do the internal work first, self-reflection, a power audit, IRB review, and auditing their own donor contracts for data governance clauses. So you can't promise a community control over its own data if your founder's contract already signed that control away. And phase 2 is partnership foundation. So this is a relationship building and free prior informed consent. So I want to stress that FPIC here is collective, it's ongoing, and mandatory. It's not a one-time signature. It's built around community governance protocols and not a protocol that we import. And phase 3 is partnership framework. So this is where the relationship becomes durable and documented. For example, you might sign formal agreements and also have the mechanisms set up for Indigenous data sovereignty and also arrangements for benefit sharing. And phase 4 is collaborative monitoring design. So basically means co-design of protocols that community design indicators or define indicators, and it's bi-directional knowledge exchange, meaning that knowledge has to flow both ways, not just from community to researcher. And phase 5 is implementation and adaptive management, which mapped onto the conservation standards step 3. So this is actually the least documented phase in the literature. Most research covers how partnerships start, not how they're sustained over years of actual fieldwork. So in practice, this is where monitoring runs day to day, guided by a joint governance body, like community and the researchers together, that they would actually meet regularly to review data and make decisions. So two things break partnerships here if you don't plan for them is one, staff turnover, which needs a real handover process, and two, conflict, which needs resolution mechanisms set up back in phase 3 and used the moment tension appears. And adaptive here means the protocol will change as you go. So those changes go through the joint governance body with consent revisited if a change is significant. And the last phase, the phase 6, is analysis, interpretation, and knowledge mobilization. So this is the most, I think, is the most epistemologically difficult phase. So what do you do when the community knowledge holder and the scientific researcher look at the same data and reach different conclusions? So the guiding principle, which is drawn from the multiple evidence-based approach, is not to force integration. So you keep the two knowledge systems distinct and complementary rather than merging them into one answer, because forcing integration usually just means one system kind of quietly overrides the other. So where they diverge, that divergence gets reported openly instead of being smoothed over. So knowledge holders are involved throughout the analysis itself. They shouldn't be brought in afterward to kind of bless conclusions researchers already reached, and nothing goes outdoor. For example, reports or briefs or papers without the community governance body reviewing it first, with real authority to require changes, restrict dissemination, or be listed as co-authors. So results also get communicated back in multiple formats, not just as academic papers. So because a peer-reviewed article in English probably satisfies a researcher's institution, but not the community's actual need to use the findings. And at project end, the data itself goes back to community control. It shouldn't stay with a researcher indefinitely. So one last thing I want to highlight here is that these phases are not strictly linear. So especially phases 3 through 6, which look back on each other constantly in real projects. So if you are a practitioner walking into a partnership that's already underway, phases 1 through 3 are designed to work more diagnostically. So you can use them to assess where an existing relationship stands, not just to start one from scratch. So that's the sort of the shape of the work on the TK part. It has a guide that gives practitioners a concrete phase-by-phase way to work with communities as rights holders and knowledge partners, and a set of platform entries that showcase the monitoring methods communities are already using successfully. So both pieces are grounded in the same evidence base, the same legal frameworks, and the same commitment that this is engagement with Indigenous peoples and local communities, not extraction from them. So I'll hand it back to Gautam for the next step.
Thank you so much, Xiao. And I again want to thank Xiao for her contributions because what she didn't mention is a lot of what she has produced here was well over what was initially planned for. That she, in addition to the sort of case study approach, she saw the need for this comprehensive guidance and then just went ahead and made it to all of our benefit. So with that said, we've talked a lot, but it is time for the main event, which is to actually show you all what we have produced. So Vanessa, who is currently going by an assumed name, is going to share her screen and give us a website demo. So I'm going to stop sharing mine and take it away, Ness.
Thanks. I'm just trying to pull it up. 1 second. For some reason, it's not displaying what.
I can also share my screen and you can just sort of tell me where to click if that's helpful.
Okay, let me just see. Yeah, that would be great because I'm having to reopen Zoom, which I don't want to do. I'm going to put the URL to the website in the chat right now so everyone has access to it. But if you want to just, you can open it up and browse along with me if you'd like. But also, yeah, I'll just be doing a demo of all of the site content and the main navigation that we have. So again, this is a accumulation of all of the work that Xiao and Gautam just outlined. We had so many different partners that we worked with, different types of global contributors, a lot of different literature that went into it. And then the culmination is this repository of monitoring methods that we've put together. So we'll start here. This is the landing page for the site. There's a little dashboard right there that tells you a little bit about the content that's on here. If you can scroll down, Gautam, there's a welcome to the platform, which gives you just a brief overview if you've never heard of COMET, kind of what's going on the site here. And then there are these 4 grids. If you scroll down a little bit more, Gautam, these 4 grids, the habitat, human well-being, species, threats, and pressures. These are all examples of the types of monitoring that we have. You can click into any of these and it'll take you to the monitoring methods page. But we'll show you that specifically through the main navigation. But you can see here that in the habitat, there's 23 habitat methods. There's 4 human well-being. We have 33 species methods and 13 threats and pressures methods. You can keep scrolling down, Gautam. So, or just up a little, sorry, that explore more. So you can also hit this explore more button, and then that will also take you to the monitoring methods page, which we'll go to after. And then scroll down. So if you can't find what you're looking for, we have a very clear call to action area called can't find what you're looking for. This is where you can submit monitoring methods. So this is a feature that's on a few different pages throughout the site. So we want to make sure that this site continues to be updated by the users and by people that have other methods that they think fit the COMET criteria and would benefit this community. So there's an option for you to find this form and be able to submit a monitoring method, and we'll go through that as well. And then at the bottom, you can see there's a footer that's just got a lot of quick links to different pages, and also just obviously noting that this is a COMET project and a CMP. This is a CMP project. So back up to the top, Gautam. So the first thing on our main navigation, we have monitoring methods, traditional knowledge about, and then sign in. So the monitoring methods, if you click on that, this is bringing you to our main repository for all of those methods. So the ones that are both traditional and non-traditional monitoring methods are housed on this page. So you can scroll down, Gautam. There's a list of the COMET criteria here. So these are the things that we really were measuring in order to put a monitoring method on the site. We looked at measuring outcome-focused indicators, practical, scalable, and replicable indicators, accurate, sensitive, and statistically robust methods, evidence-based methods, full cycle adaptive management methods, open source, and lastly, cost-effective. So methods had to meet all or most of these criteria in order for them to be on the site. So that's another limiting factor to what type of monitoring methods are found on this site. But the idea, again, is what Gautam was mentioning. These are so that you can take them and put them into your own place-based project cycle wherever you are in that conservation standards cycle. So if you scroll down, there's a search bar, which you can type in descriptive words, keywords, etc., and pull up methods. I would highly recommend using our filter system to find different methods if you don't know what keywords to look for when you first land here. So we have this typology that Gautam had showed earlier. We have these main method categories that if you want to select all or see all Gautam, it has all of the 7 of them that we have. And then there's subcategory, which are basically just helping to sort through different freshwater marine, the physical and spiritual well-being, terrestrial. And then if you just wanted to look at all of the traditional knowledge methods, that's the place where you can toggle that. So if you toggle that, Gautam, it'll show you, it goes from 82 methods if you hit the traditional knowledge button. It goes from 82 methods to 37. And so all of these are the traditional knowledge methods, and that's just a way for you to be able to see them all in one area. So you can unselect that. So all of the methods are here. There's 82 methods right now. Each of them has this preview. So they have, a couple keywords that are previewing and then a short sentence describing what the method is. If you view the method, so if you just go to the perimeter patrols, that first one, Gautam, if you view the method, you can click anywhere on it or that button. It takes you to a landing page that's the detail method page. So this will have a summary of kind of an abstract style summary of what that method is. You can keep scrolling down. There's other use cases. So again, a lot of these methods can be used in other uses. So we've noted where those can be. There are requirements. So if there's any tools and equipment, software, personnel, etc., and then any tools, guidance, and support is linked, and you can find that there. Keep scrolling down. If there are any limitations, they're noted. And then also if there is a specific group or organization or community that's using a method, we've noted them in the used by. And then all of the traditional knowledge considerations are built with whatever those traditional knowledge considerations are for that particular method, and then also a link to our practitioner's guide. And then if you scroll down, at the bottom of the page, there are related methods. And so whatever you've selected in your method, if there are related methods, they'll show up here and you can kind of filter around and sort through and select and go that way. And again, that can't find what you're looking for, submit a monitoring method is at the end of each of those pages as well. So there's an option. If you're not seeing something that you think should be a method that you think should be on the in the COMET repository, you can submit one through the form. So if you go back up, Gautam, to the monitoring methods, just click that top, yeah. If you hit something like, let's do habitat. So this has 19 methods for habitat. You'll see again, there's a variety of different, marine, freshwater, terrestrial types of methods. If you click on the rapid stream habitat assessment, again, these are similar. All of them have the standardized format. So it was a little bit of a challenge to figure out how to represent both the traditional and non-traditional knowledge methods, but we've kind of limited it to these types of like summary, requirements, tools, guidance, and support. If you scroll down, Gautam, all of them have all of this information here. And again, those related methods. So if you go back to the monitoring methods page, you'll also note that there's a heart on each of the methods. If you were to select that, and it will drive you to the sign-in page. So normally I'm signed in, so it shows you, but we'll show you how to do that as well. But basically you can save methods to your own profile. And that way, when you come back to the repository, we imagine this building and building. So hopefully there will be hundreds of methods on this. You don't have to go through and sort and filter. If you already like a method, you can favorite it and save it to your profile. And they're organized by these, that method category typology. So it's really easy to save and come back to your own profile if that's, a useful resource for you. And then if you scroll down to the bottom of this page, you'll also see that submit a method form. So if you want to click actually into that quickly right now, again, it shows you the criteria that we had for COMET. So just as another reference point, before you're submitting, just make sure that you look at these types of criteria that we had for COMET and make sure that your monitoring method meets at least most of these. And then just quickly, for the sake of time, this is a form. If you go down, Gautam, and scroll through, it's asking basically for your name, your email. There are certain things that are mandatory. They have the asterisks next to them. We have the category, subcategory, and indicator. If it is a traditional knowledge method, you can toggle that. That'll basically give it that little icon at the bottom of your thumbnail. If it's not, then don't do anything. And then we do require an image for the thumbnail. So that's the only image that you're required to upload. But if you keep scrolling down, there it asks for things like the description. There are word counts on these, word limits. There's a summary that we ask for. Then a few of the other categories are not mandatory. So other use cases, requirements, keep scrolling down, please. Limitations, traditional knowledge considerations, and then organizations using this method and any case studies you have. You'll see that in the case studies and all of these different submission form areas, there's an editor module that you can bold, italicize, underline, and then you can also link to things. So for a lot of these, we are encouraging people to add links, and that's written in a lot of the descriptions, please link to anything that you have. There's also an area for you to drop relevant documents, upload videos or images. And then lastly, if the videos or images are too large, you can link to them in these reference links. Like if there's a YouTube video or a webinar or things like that, you can add them to the reference links. Will you show them the reference links, Gautam? Just scroll down. And then you submit the method. And the method, once it's submitted, will go to Claire, Jacqueline, and myself, and Adam at SongSwift, who is the developer, and his team developed this whole site. And so we will get that monitoring method, and then there's a little bit of a process for making sure that we verify everything, make sure everything looks right. If there's any typos or things like that, we correct those. We possibly may reach out to you for information if we need clarification on anything. And then if it all fits the COMET criteria, we will publish that method and it will become part of the repository. So if you can scroll up. Sorry to go through that really quickly, but we're happy to answer more questions as well. So if you can go to the traditional knowledge page. So Xiao went into a lot of depth on this and the importance of our inclusion of traditional knowledge and just the importance of traditional knowledge when in conservation projects, as well as in the monitoring process, and how to analyze those results. And if you can scroll down, Gautam. So this is just a page dedicated to that information. It's very high level, why it matters, relevance in conservation and monitoring, and then examples of traditional knowledge, if you can scroll down. So on this page, there's the guide for engaging with traditional knowledge holders. We'll click on that in a second. And then the explore traditional knowledge monitoring methods. When you click there, it will take you back to that monitoring methods page with all of the traditional knowledge methods highlighted. But for the sake of time, we'll just click on that guide for traditional knowledge holders that Xiao was mentioning as one of the deliverables. So this is a PDF downloadable. It's I think 55 or 57 page guide that Xiao explained and expressed. This has those phases, case studies, a lot of great information. This will probably have another round of edits that we will add to it. But for now, this is, yeah, thanks. Go to the table of contents. You can see all of it's really the theory and foundation that Xiao walked through, then some guidelines, regional guidelines, and also all of the case studies associated with them. And then the last part, if you go down to the bottom, Gautam, is this 6-phase guide to ethical engagement with the IPL and LCs. So this guide is there for everyone's resource. As a resource, please use it. We try, shall try to make it as digestible and useful as possible. So it's there and can be used. So Gautam, if you go back to the site. If you scroll down, an adaptive, there's this interconnected flow with Indigenous methods. These are some of the pieces that Xiao was talking about in terms of the cycle and process and how it's ongoing. So you can check that out as well. And then at the bottom of this page, there are just other traditional knowledge methods that you can refer to. So then back up to the top, Gautams, because we're running low on time. The About page has an overview of the COMET project. So again, this is a CMP project. There's the information about why this project came to be and how it came to be. If you scroll down, how does COMET work? There's a project page. Can you click on that link, please? This is a separate page. It's not in the main navigation, but there's a lot of information on here. If you wanted to read our full funder report, it's on here. We also address the gaps and opportunities that we have. And if you can scroll down as well, Gautam, there's an option to submit a method. We also have just additional resources on this page. We know that there are a lot of people doing things with monitoring in our sphere, and we want to acknowledge that those things exist. So there's a lot of resources that are very helpful. They're not necessarily just focused on delivering monitoring methods that can be used in your projects. So we wanted to call them out here. We do know that these are very useful and helpful resources. So there's a long list here. If there's anything you think should be here that you don't see here, you're the community we would love to hear from, and any of your colleagues if there are things you think we need to also add. But there's a pretty robust list. So if you go back up to the top, this is just kind of the nitty gritty of the details. And then also on that About page, Gautam, sorry, back to the About page. Scroll to the bottom. You'll just see that we've noted that CMP is the project. The project is a CMP project. There's info right above the fold there, Gautam. You can email them if you'd like. Reach out to CMP info. Our funders, again, were Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation, and obviously the Wildlife Conservation Society was the partner as the project managers of the project. And so lastly, if you go to the sign-in page up at the main navigation, it'll ask you either for just your email, you can sign in with Google, but we really, if you don't have an account, if you can sign up using that sign up at the bottom, Gautam. Just that button, the link at the bottom, don't have an account. So you already have an account. So if you, yeah. So this is just, we are just asking for your name, email. You can come up with a password, where you are, the country you're affiliated with, and your user type. This is just information that CMP would use to know who their user base are, just a better idea for if we need to get more methods from different countries, and just give us an idea of where people are engaging with COMET from. You can also just sign on through Google, and all of that information won't be required of you. But once you do create an account, sorry, Gautam, if you can go back and sign in.
I'm just going to continue with Google momentarily because I think
Yeah, that's fine.
I forget what my website login is, but here I
So
am.
basically, when you do log in, it'll just have this user info at the top. If Gautam had gone through and saved methods, they would all be located here, and they are sorted and organized. Again, you can see this high level typology that we had. They'll just organized by that. So this is a way where if you wanted to get a catalog of your methods, they would be stored here. Again, feel free to move around in the site. There's a lot of potential with this site. We're hoping that, eventually we can potentially use AI to integrate and be able to pull in more methods. We really are hoping that this feels like a collaborative piece that people feel like they can submit monitoring methods. And so we'll be doing a little bit of call to action. We'll be asking folks to submit if they do have methods. But overall, yeah, there's a lot of ways that this site can continue to build and grow. We've had a lot of great discussions already with CMP members over the last year about, features and things that would make this even better. So we really appreciate all of your feedback. And again, we're excited to be able to present this as our first, launch of the site.
Thank you so much, Vanessa. And I'm going to move quickly to Rachel to give her final thoughts.
Great, yeah, and I realize we're at the hour, but I begged permission from Claire to go a little over an hour to make sure we have time for all of your questions and discussion items. So feel free to type questions in the chat, or I'll let Claire moderate if folks want to raise hands and ask questions. Just in conclusion, go ahead to the next slide, Gautam. So in terms of next steps, as everyone has already mentioned, we hope this is a living repository. So if you log in and you're looking for a method and you can't find it there, please do help us add to this repository over time. We do not claim for COMET to be comprehensive. It's not comprehensive. That was not the goal. This is the first iteration. So we fully expect people to log in and to not find things that they're looking for. So please help us build this resource over time. Please do review those criteria. So the reason that some methods are not currently listed, like I think eDNA might be an example, or even bioacoustics, is that while those methods are being used in lots of places, the guidance is not really quite there in terms of things that we can hand to practitioners and they can pick them up today with sort of no training and no background and know how to implement those methods. So guidance is one of the reasons that some of the methods still aren't there. That said, if you know about great guidance, open source guidance or resources or tutorials about doing eDNA or doing bioacoustics or other methods that are missing, please do send those our way because we would love to add them. Go ahead, next slide. And yeah, so we'll be checking monthly for those submissions. We also might be proactively reaching out to some of you for specific gaps that we're hoping to fill. Most importantly, you guys are our best communicators about this work. This will only be a useful resource if people know about it and use it and add to it. So please, please, please spread the word. We can post links in the chat. There's LinkedIn posts about this from the Conservation Measures Partnership. WCS did a news release yesterday on our website. Maybe you can post those. Please repost, please share, please tell your colleagues about this, anyone you think might be interested. If somebody says, oh, I went to the website and it didn't have what I was looking for, say like, great, we need your help. Let's try to leverage that into getting more input here. Also, just in terms of next steps. So we have lots of ideas about the future of COMET. We would love to build in, we've had lots of cool conversations about adding to the traditional knowledge component and building on that. Xiao is continuing work with her group to continue to build guidance and examples and literature reviews. We have lots of ideas on AI functionality that we would love to add. So if anybody's interested in talking about sort of the future of COMET, the platform ideas for how we can improve it, please contact us. And yeah, that's it. Next slide. And last but not least, I really want to thank again the Moore Foundation and the CMP board for supporting this work. This was truly a large group effort. So specifically, I want to thank our steering committee, David Wilkie, Tara Stevens, and Will Beal, who are the visionaries behind this project. I want to thank the advisory group, those of you who served as advisors as we were developing this, and to all of you who joined webinars, joined a session at the rally, contributed methods, did interviews, provided feedback and input, and obviously the entire COMET team, too many people to name, but Adam and Sam Swift and Vanessa and Gautam and Xiao. and Varsha, and I'm sure I'm forgetting some names, but huge thanks to all of you. And with that, I think we'll take questions. Claire, maybe I'll pass it to you to moderate the questions.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all so much. The chat is quite difficult to moderate because there's so much praise coming in for you guys. So that's a great sign. One question that I noticed from Elsevier that has not been answered yet is she says, oh, the chat's moving. She says, I might have missed it, but if I'm looking for inspiration to do a specific type of work and I don't see a relevant method on the site, but I also don't know where I might find it, is there a way to ask the community or the COMET team to point in that direction if it exists? And ultimately, obviously, then hopefully it gets added by somebody else. Vanessa, you're on mute.
Sorry, I would say this is one of those things that we definitely want to include in some future version where there is some sort of like dialogue or discussion board that people can add to. For now, the best way to reach out is to reach out to the CMP info. That's what we have as our default for if you're not seeing something. But if you do have a method that you want to submit, that's where that form comes into play. It doesn't have to be, we're looking for the most, if people do submit them, we want them to be as fully filled out as possible. But otherwise, yeah, right now it's just that, we were a small and nimble team. So if you reach out to the CMP team, I think they'll disseminate to the larger group and we can try and answer any questions.
Elsevier, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. I think why I'm actually asked this question is, for instance, we've just joined I've just been in a new EU grant, and they have a whole set of sort of EU indicators, and it's really difficult to figure out what they actually want and how the methodology attached to that. It seems so simple. Obviously EU must have a whole repository of, this is the methods we want you guys to use, but it has been more difficult than anticipated. So finding like a little group of EU practitioners or EU grant implementers and finding out, I saw there were one or two ones that I saw the methods there, but that was what prompted my question. Thanks.
Great. Any other comments or questions from anyone? Anyone want to stick your hand up and ask a question directly? No. Okay. I think Gautam has scoured the chat and tried to address many of the comments and questions that were in there. So if anyone's comment was not addressed, now's the time. See, there's a few more coming in. Giselle seems like she's going to be submitting lots of new methods to the website. So thanks, Giselle. Go ahead, Tamia.
Yeah, hi everyone. Amazing site, and thank you for the presentation. Maybe my question is, because I always am thinking about how like case studies. Will the website have like case studies as to how some of these methods or links of the methods with like examples of like challenges or difficulties or suggestions? Because there is a method which some of them, we might already know, but then, reality hits and then it's like, okay, I think so. I was wondering if like eventually you will have case studies or examples as to, especially with the traditional ecological knowledge. I think that's amazing how you have integrated and make it a big part of it. And I was thinking especially about that, like about the engagement and like examples of how these different methods have been applied. And I know you have considered like all those frameworks and principles, but sometimes examples just like give you a glimpse on like, oh, okay, this is exactly how they did it, or I don't know. I was thinking about that, like the implementation or examples of these monitoring methods. Thank you.
I can feel part of that, and then I'll leave it to Xiao for the traditional knowledge piece. So yes, we are trying to link as much as possible to things like case studies, like actual protocol documents. So, very specifically, like, take this piece of tape, put it this long, take the plants within that, those really step-by-step things where they exist. The limitations, that one's interesting because actually one of the issues is that, and this is sort of a scientific thing, is that negative stuff doesn't get published as much as positive stuff, right? When people find things don't work, that information gets less disseminated than it did work. And that's another thing we'd love to crowdsource. So if people have, there's a question in the chat about, if you have extra case studies, how do you submit them? And, we said you basically use the same method name and then ignore the other fields and just put in the links you have. Same thing for limitations. If you want to sort of point to something, especially if it's like written up in some reporty form that we can link to, that would be awesome. And we'd love to feature things like that. And then Xiao, if you want to talk about the traditional knowledge aspect.
Yeah, sure. I think for traditional knowledge aspect, I really agree that case studies would be really strong if we have them, especially how it is implemented. I think from the current literature that we kind of went through, there aren't many what we are looking for from like A to Z kind of from the beginning to end the kind of implementations in terms of two knowledge systems working together. There are bits of it, in terms of, we kind of have this aspect of traditional knowledge like incorporated, but from like from the beginning to the end of the project, kind of this whole cycle manner is not very many, I would say, case study wise. But for methods per se, I would say there's plenty of the things that we can definitely use for stronger case studies to actually illustrate how traditional knowledge indigenous monitoring methods are actually done. And I think there are quite a few of the case studies and examples being put into the website as well. But it would be nice to have a sort of the, from A to Z type of the whole cycle thing, cases, if we have any, if we manage to have any in the future, that would be great. I'm not sure if I answered your question, but that's more of my reactions to the traditional knowledge aspect. Thanks.
Thanks,
Yeah, and
Shannon.
I would also just say there are a lot of case studies in certain methods that if we had them, we included them. They were like place-based and specific. So, and they're linked in the actual methods themselves. But yeah, not every method had case studies that had things that we could link to.
So a great punt to the community to actually write up their monitoring methods and write up their case studies, because you realize there's so much actually going on that people are doing, but it's not documented anywhere. So this is the punt to encourage your teammates to write things up and get them on the website and share them with others. All right. Any additional comments, questions from the COMET team or from any of you? Anything else anyone wants to address before we move on to the CMP business? Okay. Well, from our side, from CMP side, we wanted to say a huge thank you to the entire team. Adam, Vanessa, I know you guys have been working insane hours and overtime, and we are so grateful for all of the time and effort that all of you have put into this. And we know that it's not over yet. There's going to be COMET 2.0 coming and lots of updates and improvements as time goes on. So just a huge thank you to the team. You guys have done a superb job. To the rest of the community, thank you for holding on. I know you were all chomping at the bit to see this website, and I know we promised it to you in March, but it's absolutely worth the wait. So a huge thank you for your patience, but really to the rest of the team, we are so grateful. You guys have pulled together an amazing website, and we are really proud to put the CMP logo on it. So thank you.